Picture a landscape so ancient it seems to whisper secrets from a time before memory. In the quiet countryside of Brittany, France, rows of weathered grey stones stand silent sentinel across the fields, stretching toward the horizon in mysterious alignments that have captivated human imagination for thousands of years. These are the Carnac Stones, Europe's most extraordinary prehistoric monument, a puzzle carved in granite that continues to baffle archaeologists, historians, and visitors alike. There's something deeply haunting about walking among these megaliths, feeling the weight of centuries in their worn surfaces, knowing that the hands that placed them here belonged to people whose world we can scarcely comprehend. What drove these ancient communities to undertake such a monumental task? How did they move these massive stones, some weighing tens of tons, into perfect rows that stretch for kilometers across the landscape? And perhaps most intriguing of all, what purpose did these alignments serve? Were they ancient calendars tracking the movements of sun and stars, sacred pathways for religious processions, memorials to forgotten heroes, or something even more mysterious, something we haven't yet imagined? The stones hold their silence, offering clues but never answers, inviting us to listen to the echoes of a distant past. Join me as we step into this enigma, exploring the theories, the legends, and the compelling mysteries surrounding these ancient formations. We'll walk the same ground that has fascinated generations, from Neolithic builders to modern scientists, and consider what these silent stones might tell us about humanity's enduring need to reach beyond our understanding, to create meaning in a vast and mysterious universe. This isn't just a story about rocks in a field, it's a journey into the deepest questions about who we are and where we come from, told through one of archaeology's most enduring puzzles. To truly appreciate the mystery of Carnac, one must first grasp the almost unimaginable scale of this achievement. This is not merely a collection of stones, but a vast, engineered landscape constructed with purpose and precision. The site is composed of three primary groups of alignments, each with its own character, stretching across the countryside like the vertebrae of some colossal, petrified beast. The westernmost group, Ménec, acts as a powerful introduction with its 11 converging rows of over 1,100 standing stones, guarded at each end by what remains of a stone circle or cromlech. Walking alongside these rows, the mind reels at the organizational feat required to plan and execute such a design. Moving east, the Kermario alignment continues this breathtaking procession. Its 10 rows are perhaps the most iconic, featuring some of the largest menhirs, a term derived from the Breton language meaning long stone. These towering monoliths, hewn from local granite, march with a solemn regularity across the land, their sizes varying dramatically from stones that rise no higher than your knee to silent giants standing over 4 meters tall. The purpose behind this deliberate grading in height, often arranged in a subtle curve, is one of the many tantalizing clues left by the builders. It suggests a sophistication that challenges our perception of Neolithic society. Completing the main sequence is the Kerlescan group, slightly smaller but no less impressive, with 13 rows that lead toward a compact cromlech, a circular arrangement that feels like a destination or a focal point. But the complexity of Carnac extends far beyond these famous lines. Scattered throughout this open-air museum are other monumental forms. There are dolmens, which are stone table tombs often covered by earthen mounds called tumuli, silent burial chambers that speak to a profound reverence for the dead. Single, massive standing stones, known as menhirs, stand apart from the rows, perhaps as territorial markers or memorials. When you step back to view it as a whole, the numbers become staggering. We are discussing nearly 3,000 individual megaliths, each one quarried, transported sometimes over significant distances, and erected by a society without metal tools, without draft animals, without the wheel. The cumulative effort represents an immense investment of time, labor, and belief, a project that would have spanned generations. This was not a whim, it was a central, defining endeavor for the people who built it, something so vital to their worldview that they dedicated centuries to its creation. This sheer magnitude is the first and most compelling piece of evidence that we are looking at something far more significant than a random arrangement. To understand the profound mystery of the Carnac Stones, we must first step back through the millennia and situate ourselves in the world of their creators. We are traveling back to the Neolithic period, a time of revolutionary change for humanity. This was not the age of the cave dweller, but rather the dawn of the farmer. Around 4,500 to 3,300 before the Common Era, the communities inhabiting what is now Brittany were transitioning from a life of hunting and gathering to one centered on agriculture and settled village life. This shift fundamentally altered their relationship with the land, the seasons, and each other. It was within this context of newfound stability and a growing population that these societies embarked on their most ambitious project, the construction of the megalithic alignments. The dating of these monuments is a fascinating scientific detective story in itself. How can we possibly know the age of a silent, inorganic stone? Archaeologists have had to become clever chronologists, relying on indirect but highly reliable methods. The most crucial technique is radiocarbon dating, but it requires organic material. Fortunately, the builders of Carnac left behind clues in the soil. By carefully excavating around the bases of the stones or within the associated burial mounds, scientists have discovered fragments of charcoal from ancient fires, scattered animal bones from ritual feasts, and even pollen grains preserved for thousands of years. Analyzing these organic remnants allows researchers to pin down a surprisingly accurate timeline, revealing that the main phase of construction unfolded over more than 1,000 years. Another key method involves the analysis of pottery styles. Just like fashions change today, the design of ceramics, their shape, decoration, and crafting technique evolved in distinct ways over centuries. When shards of a particular type of pottery are found in a sealed archaeological layer alongside a megalith, it acts like a timestamp, helping to confirm the dates obtained through radiocarbon analysis. This combination of evidence paints a consistent picture. The Carnac alignments are astoundingly ancient. To put this into perspective, the oldest stones at Carnac were being erected centuries before the first massive stones were dragged to Salisbury Plain for Stonehenge, and over 1,000 years before the Great Pyramid of Giza was even a concept in an Egyptian pharaoh's mind. This timeline is humbling. It forces us to reevaluate our assumptions about so-called primitive societies. The people who built Carnac were master engineers and keen astronomers without the writing systems, metal tools, or complex machinery we might assume are necessary for such feats. Their achievement stands as a testament to what can be accomplished with coordinated community effort, profound cultural will, and an intimate knowledge of the natural world. They moved these colossal stones using nothing but wooden sledges, ropes made from plant fibers, and the brute strength of many people working in unison, a physical manifestation of their shared beliefs and collective identity. This was the work of generations, a continuous project that outlived its original planners, meaning the purpose and meaning of the stones had to be so deeply ingrained in their culture that it could be passed down and sustained for centuries. So who were these people possessing such ambition and coordination? We often envision prehistoric societies as small bands struggling for daily survival, but the builders of Carnac were part of a sophisticated, settled culture. Their world was one of emerging villages, cleared fields for crops like wheat and barley, and domesticated animals such as cattle and sheep. This shift to farming was the essential foundation that made the megaliths possible. A stable food supply meant that not everyone had to be directly involved in food production every single day. It freed up labor, allowed for population growth, and crucially, it created a surplus. This surplus of time and resources could then be channeled into something monumental, something that transcended the immediate needs of shelter and hunger. Theirs was a society capable of long-term planning and profound collective purpose. The tools they used to achieve this feat were ingeniously crafted from the materials available to them. Without metal, they became masters of stone and bone. Large stone mauls, essentially rounded granite pounders, were used to hammer and shape the megaliths directly at the quarry. Wedges made from deer antler were driven into natural fissures in the rock, sometimes with the help of water which would expand upon freezing to crack off large slabs. To move these multi-ton stones, they likely constructed wooden sledges from massive tree trunks, rolling the stones atop them and then dragging the entire assembly across the landscape. We can picture teams of people using ropes made from twisted plant fibers, heaving in unison, perhaps lubricating the path with wet clay to reduce friction. Every step, from quarrying to transportation to the final erection, was a triumph of Neolithic engineering and raw human determination. The scale of this labor points to a highly organized social structure. This was not a haphazard effort by a few families. Erecting just one of the larger menhirs would have required the coordinated muscle of dozens, if not hundreds, of individuals, all working under a clear and respected chain of command. There would have been planners who understood the astronomy and geometry of the alignments, foremen who directed the work crews, and skilled toolmakers who kept the equipment functional. This level of organization suggests a society with defined roles, perhaps even emerging social stratification, led by individuals who could command not just labor but belief. The project's continuity across generations implies a powerful and enduring cultural narrative, a shared mythos so strong that each new generation felt compelled to continue the work their ancestors began. Ultimately, the driving force behind Carnac was almost certainly spiritual. The immense investment of time and energy, far beyond what was necessary for mere survival, speaks to a deep, pervasive motivation rooted in belief. For these early farmers, the world was alive with meaning and mystery. The cycles of the sun, moon, and seasons dictated their survival. The sun's warmth made their crops grow, and its winter absence was a time of fear. It is easy to imagine them seeking to understand, honor, and perhaps influence these cosmic forces through these great stone avenues. The alignments may have been a permanent, physical prayer etched into the very land they cultivated, a way to ensure the sun's return, to honor their ancestors buried in the nearby tumuli, or to mark a sacred pathway between the world of the living and the realm of the spirits. The stones are a permanent record of their awe, their questions, and their desire to connect with something greater than themselves. Considering the sheer scale of the stones, some weighing more than a team of modern elephants, the question of how they were moved is one of the most tangible aspects of the Carnac mystery. Without the wheel, metal, or beasts of burden, the Neolithic builders relied on a profound understanding of physics, readily available materials, and the power of collective human effort. The process likely began at a local granite outcrop where the chosen stone was painstakingly separated from the bedrock. This wasn't done with explosives or saws, but with patient, percussive force. Workers may have used fire to heat the stone surface, then rapidly cooled it with water to create stress fractures, before employing heavy stone mauls to pound along a natural fault line until a slab broke free. Once quarried, the real challenge began, transporting the monolith across kilometers of uneven terrain to its final destination. The most widely supported theory involves a sophisticated system of wooden sledges and rollers. Imagine a sledge crafted from the fork of a large, sturdy tree, upon which the stone was carefully levered and secured with ropes. This sledge wouldn't be dragged directly across the ground. Instead, a path would be prepared ahead of it with wooden rollers, likely tree trunks stripped of their branches. Teams of people would pull on ropes made from twisted animal hide or plant fibers, heaving the colossal weight forward. As the sledge advanced, rollers from the back would be constantly carried to the front, creating a continuous moving track. The sheer manpower required for this is staggering. Experiments and modern reconstructions, like those conducted at the Baugon Museum not far from Carnac, have shown that a 1-ton stone could be moved by a dozen or so people using these methods. But the larger menhirs at Carnac weigh significantly more, some reaching 20 or 30 tons. Moving a stone of that magnitude would have required a coordinated team of well over 100 individuals, all pulling in perfect unison, likely directed by a rhythm or chant to synchronize their efforts. The path itself might have been engineered for success, lubricated with wet clay or animal fat to reduce friction, and carefully chosen to avoid the steepest slopes. But moving the stone was only half the battle. The final, heart-stopping act was raising it into its vertical position. This feat of Neolithic engineering is perhaps even more impressive than the transport. One compelling method involves the construction of a ramp and a pit. A deep socket would be dug at the intended location for the base of the stone. The menhir, still on its sledge, would be positioned next to this pit. Then, using a system of wooden levers and props, the team would slowly and carefully tilt one end of the stone upward, perhaps packing earth and stones underneath it to hold the gained height. Incrementally, they would build an earthen ramp behind the stone, allowing them to continue levering it upward until its center of gravity shifted and the base slid down into the prepared socket. The final adjustments would be made with ropes to ensure it stood perfectly straight before the socket was packed tightly with smaller stones and earth to secure it for millennia. This entire process, from the first hammer strike at the quarry to the final packing of the socket, was a symphony of applied physics, raw strength, and meticulous planning. It reveals a society that was not merely surviving but collaborating on an almost unimaginable scale. The project required more than just laborers. It demanded engineers who understood leverage and friction, organizers who could manage vast teams, and a shared cultural motivation powerful enough to sustain such a backbreaking, dangerous, and long-term endeavor. Each standing stone is therefore not just a silent sentinel from the past, but a permanent monument to human cooperation, ingenuity, and the enduring will to shape the world according to a profound and mysterious vision. With the stones standing silent in the earth, the question that has echoed for centuries remains: why were they placed here with such immense effort? The leading theory, and perhaps the most captivating, proposes that the Carnac alignments functioned as a sophisticated astronomical observatory, a colossal calendar etched in stone. Proponents of this view point to the precise orientation of the rows. Many alignments are set on a general east-west axis, with specific stones or gaps between rows appearing to frame the rising and setting sun during the solstices. During the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the sun would have risen in perfect alignment with certain rows, casting long, dramatic shadows that perhaps pointed toward a significant stone or altar. Similarly, the winter solstice sunrise, a moment of profound importance for early farmers hoping for the sun's return and the rebirth of the land, may have been marked by another carefully positioned menhir. This theory extends beyond the sun to include the complex cycles of the moon. Some researchers argue that the more intricate patterns and smaller groupings of stones, particularly within the Kerlescan sector, could have been used to track the moon's 18.6-year cycle, a feat of observational astronomy that demonstrates a deep, long-term understanding of celestial mechanics. For an agricultural society, this knowledge was not abstract. It was essential for determining the optimal times for planting and harvesting, for organizing communal ceremonies, and for maintaining a calendar. The stones, in this view, become a permanent, reliable reference point, a way to anchor their cyclical world to the immutable movements of the heavens. It transforms the site from a random collection of rocks into a testament to Neolithic intellectual achievement, a proto-scientific instrument of breathtaking scale. Yet, a compelling alternative theory suggests the primary purpose was spiritual, not scientific. These alignments may have formed the world's largest open-air temple, a sacred procession route for religious rituals. Walking between the converging rows of towering stones would have been a powerful, immersive experience. The architecture itself would have guided participants, perhaps priests or community members, along a predetermined path toward a ritual endpoint like the cromlech circles. This journey could have symbolized a transition from the profane world into a sacred space, a physical manifestation of a spiritual pathway. The very act of processing together would have reinforced social bonds and shared identity, uniting the community through shared ritual and belief. This idea connects closely to another powerful motivation: ancestor worship. The presence of numerous dolmens and burial mounds scattered among the alignments is a crucial piece of this puzzle. It is highly plausible that the rows of standing stones served as a monumental memorial, a permanent honor to the revered dead who were buried nearby. The menhirs themselves might even symbolize individual ancestors or clan leaders, their enduring granite representing the eternal presence of their spirits within the community. Ceremonies held within the alignments could have been designed to communicate with these ancestors, to seek their guidance for the living, or to ensure their favor for a successful harvest. The stones thus become a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the dead, a permanent landscape of memory and reverence. Other scholars propose more pragmatic, though no less fascinating, explanations. Some suggest the lines acted as territorial markers, a way for a growing, settled society to visibly define its control over the landscape in a clear and imposing manner. The sheer scale of the project would have broadcasted the power, wealth, and organizational ability of the community to any potential rivals. Another theory, now largely debated, drew a parallel to the much later Great Wall of China, proposing the rows could have served as a livestock enclosure, a giant corral for managing herds during seasonal gatherings or rituals. While this seems less likely given the effort involved, it highlights the challenge of interpreting a culture that left no written records. The truth, as it often is with such ancient mysteries, likely lies in a combination of these ideas. For the Neolithic mind, the practical and the spiritual were not separate realms but woven together into a single understanding of the universe. A structure that tracked the solstices was not just a calendar, it was a holy site that celebrated the divine power of the sun. A processional way for religious ceremonies would have also been scheduled according to that same astronomical calendar. Honoring the ancestors through ritual was a way to ensure their continued blessing upon the crops that sustained the community. The Carnac alignments probably served all these functions simultaneously: observatory, temple, memorial, and territorial statement. They were the central, multi-purpose heart of a thriving culture, a physical expression of their entire worldview. Their understanding of time, their reverence for the divine, their connection to their past, and their claim on their future. The ongoing debate among scholars is a testament to the complexity of the site itself. It refuses to be pinned down to a single, simple explanation, forever inviting us to look deeper. The astronomical precision embedded within the Carnac alignments offers one of the most compelling arguments for their purpose, suggesting the Neolithic builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of the sky that guided their daily and seasonal lives. Focusing on the solar cycle, the most dramatic alignments occur during the solstices. At dawn on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the sun would have risen not as a random point of light, but in a carefully framed gap between the towering stones of the Kermario alignment. For an observer standing at a specific point within the complex, perhaps near the western cromlech, the entire row would have acted as a giant stone sighting tube, channeling the first golden rays of the sun directly toward them. This was not a subtle effect. It would have been a breathtaking, undeniable spectacle of light and shadow, a confirmation that the sun had reached its peak power. Conversely, the winter solstice sunrise, marking the sun's weakest point and its promised return, was likely captured by a different set of stones, perhaps in the Ménec group, offering a similar but inversely powerful message of hope and renewal in the depths of winter. This celestial choreography extended beyond the sun's extreme points to include the equinoxes, those 2 days of perfect balance each year when day and night are of equal length. While the evidence is sometimes more subtle than the dramatic solstice alignments, certain stone rows appear to be oriented toward the due east and west points on the horizon where the sun rises and sets on these equinox days. For an agricultural society, these dates were not mere astronomical curiosities. They were critical signposts in the annual cycle. The vernal equinox likely signaled the true beginning of the planting season, when the earth had warmed sufficiently for seeds to germinate. The autumnal equinox would have marked the frantic period of harvest, a time to gather crops before the onset of winter. The stones, in this context, functioned as a colossal, immutable calendar, their alignments providing an infallible method for priests or elders to determine the exact timing for these vital community activities, ensuring survival from one year to the next. Perhaps even more impressive than the solar tracking is the potential encoding of the complex lunar cycle within the granite rows. The moon's path across the sky is far more complicated than the sun's, following an 18.6-year cycle known as the lunar standstill. During this long period, the moon's rising and setting points slowly migrate along the horizon, reaching a major northern extreme and a major southern extreme before eventually returning. Some researchers, like Alexander Thom, who extensively surveyed megalithic sites, proposed that the more intricate patterns at Carnac, particularly the smaller, tighter clusters of stones in the Kerlescan sector, were designed to mark these subtle lunar extremes. Tracking this cycle required generations of meticulous observation and record-keeping, a feat that speaks to a profound intellectual tradition being passed down through oral history. The ability to predict lunar events would have held immense cultural and possibly spiritual significance, governing the timing of ceremonies, trade gatherings, and even mythologies tied to the moon's cyclical dance. For the people who built and used this landscape, these astronomical events were far more than just practical markers. They were deeply sacred, woven into the very fabric of their spirituality and worldview. The successful prediction of a solstice or the precise alignment of the moon with a particular menhir would have been seen as a powerful affirmation of their relationship with the divine forces governing the universe. It proved their rituals were effective, their knowledge was true, and their place in the cosmic order was secure. The stones were the permanent, physical proof of this covenant between the people and the powers that controlled the sun, the rain, and the seasons. They were not merely observing the heavens, they were participating in a celestial conversation, using architecture to actively engage with the rhythms of the cosmos, ensuring the continued harmony and prosperity of their world. This transforms our understanding of Carnac from a simple observatory into a dynamic ritual space where science, religion, and community seamlessly intertwine. While the scientific theories offer compelling rational explanations, the human imagination has never been satisfied with mere facts when it comes to a mystery of this scale. Long before archaeologists arrived with their surveying equipment and carbon dating machines, the people of Brittany had already crafted their own stories to explain the silent army standing in their fields. These local legends, passed down through generations, weave a rich tapestry of magic and myth that is every bit as fascinating as any scientific hypothesis. One of the most enduring and popular tales involves the legendary wizard Merlin himself. According to this folklore, the long, straight rows are not stones at all, but the remains of a vast Roman legion. The story goes that the invading forces of Rome were marching across the Breton countryside when the great enchanter, seeking to protect the local people, cast a powerful spell that turned every single soldier to stone where they stood, forever freezing them in military formation. It's a poetic and satisfyingly dramatic origin story, transforming a geological puzzle into a frozen moment of magical triumph. Another common thread in the folklore personifies the stones as a petrified army, though not always a Roman one. In some versions, they are the soldiers of a pagan emperor pursuing Saint Cornelius, the patron saint of Carnac. As the saint fled, he found himself cornered at the coast with nowhere to run. Facing certain capture, he turned and raised his hand to heaven, calling upon divine power to intervene. In answer to his prayer, God turned the entire pursuing army into stone, saving the saint and creating the alignments in a single miraculous instant. These stories share a common theme. The stones are not inanimate objects, but beings caught in a single, catastrophic moment of transformation. They provide a human-scale narrative for something otherwise incomprehensible, giving each row and menhir a name and a story, turning a confusing array of rocks into a landscape of epic drama and moral lessons. For many years, a different and more scholarly-seeming myth took hold in the popular imagination. The idea that the Carnac alignments were the work of the Druids, the learned priestly class of the Celtic Iron Age. This connection was seemingly logical. The Celts, who arrived in Brittany around 2,500 years ago, certainly used sacred groves and natural spaces for their rituals, and the idea of wise men conducting ceremonies amongst ancient stones feels intuitively right. The misconception was powerfully reinforced in the 18th and 19th centuries by antiquarians and romantics who, fascinated by a rediscovery of Celtic culture, superimposed the little that was known about the Druids onto these much older, mysterious monuments. The stones became known as Druidic altars and Druidic temples, a label that persists in some tourist materials even today, creating a persistent and understandable error. However, modern archaeology has completely unraveled this connection. As we've explored, radiocarbon dating firmly places the main construction phases of Carnac between 4,500 and 3,300 years before the Common Era. The Celtic culture, and by extension the Druids who were their spiritual leaders, did not emerge in Western Europe until the Iron Age, around 2,500 years ago. This creates an unbridgeable chronological gap of over 1,000 years, and often much more between the last stones being erected and the first Druids ever setting foot in the region. The Druids would have encountered the alignments as we do today, as awe-inspiring ancient ruins left by a people whose name and language were already long forgotten. They may have even repurposed the site for their own ceremonies, recognizing its inherent spiritual power, but they were its inheritors, not its architects. This distinction is crucial because it protects the true wonder of the Neolithic achievement. Attributing Carnac to the Druids, a people from a more technologically advanced Iron Age society with metal tools, subtly diminishes the staggering accomplishment of the earlier Stone Age builders. It steals credit from the true innovators who, with nothing but stone and bone and sheer collective will, engineered this masterpiece. The real story is far more impressive. A sophisticated society, millennia before the Celts, before the Romans, and before written history, possessed the astronomical knowledge, the social organization, and the spiritual drive to reshape their entire landscape on a gargantuan scale. The local folklore, while historically inaccurate, honors the mystery and scale of the site through the language of magic. The Druidic myth, though a well-intentioned error, ultimately obscures the more profound truth of these silent, ancient sentinels and the lost world they represent. This remarkable fusion of ancient stones and Christian belief is powerfully embodied in the legend of Saint Cornelius, a story that completely rewrote the meaning of the alignments for the medieval mind. According to this captivating tale, Cornelius was a pope fleeing relentless persecution by Roman soldiers. With his back to the sea and nowhere left to run, he performed a miracle of breathtaking scale. Turning to face his pursuers, he raised his hand and commanded the entire army to turn to stone, freezing them in their tracks for all eternity. In this Christianized folklore, the mighty menhirs are not cosmic calendars or ancestral markers. They are a petrified legion, a permanent monument to divine intervention and the triumph of faith over worldly power. The larger stones became the officers and commanders, while the smaller ones represented the common foot soldiers, forever immobilized in their rigid rows. The choice of Saint Corneli was no accident. He became the patron saint of cattle, a vital link that connected the new faith to the most fundamental aspect of local agricultural life. This was a brilliant piece of religious syncretism, a way to ease the conversion of a population for whom the old stones undoubtedly still held deep, though perhaps forgotten, power. By associating the saint with the health and fertility of their livestock, the early church provided a new Christian channel for the same hopes and fears that may have originally been directed at the megaliths. The site's ancient, inherent numinous power was not destroyed. It was simply baptized and given a new name, allowing veneration to continue within an approved framework. This enduring link is celebrated every year in early September during the Grand Pardon of Saint Corneli, a vibrant pilgrimage and festival that draws thousands of participants to the town of Carnac. The event is a fascinating layering of traditions. A solemn procession wins its way through the very streets of the town, but its most powerful moment comes when the statue of the saint is carried from the church and paraded directly amongst the ancient stone rows themselves. This act physically and symbolically brings Christianity into the heart of the pagan monument, reaffirming the legend and blessing the alignments under the saint's patronage. The ceremony is deeply tied to its agricultural roots. Farmers still bring their cattle to be blessed before the church, seeking the saint's protection for their herds against disease and ensuring fertility for the coming year. The air fills with the sounds of prayers, traditional Breton music, and the lowing of animals, creating a sensory experience that feels both ancient and immediate. It is a powerful, living tradition that does not seek to erase the pre-Christian past but rather to encompass it, to weave it into a continuous story of faith and community that stretches from the Neolithic builders to the present day. This annual event demonstrates how a place can hold multiple layers of sacred meaning simultaneously, with each generation finding its own way to connect with the mystery standing silently in the fields. The quest to understand the Carnac Stones is as much a story of evolving archaeology as it is of ancient builders. For centuries, the alignments were a subject of local legend and travelers' curiosity, but it wasn't until the 18th century that they began to be studied with a more systematic, though still rudimentary, eye. Early antiquarians like James Milne, a Scottish amateur archaeologist working in the 1870s, were among the first to approach the site not as a source of myth but as a historical puzzle to be solved through excavation. Milne's work was groundbreaking for its time. He meticulously mapped many of the alignments and conducted some of the first digs around the bases of the menhirs and within the nearby burial mounds. His most significant contribution, however, was his prodigious collection of artifacts, pottery shards, flint tools, and polished stone axes which he carefully stored and catalogued. This collection, now housed in the James Milne Museum in Carnac, became the foundational evidence that these monuments were the work of a specific, identifiable prehistoric culture, moving them from the realm of pure speculation into the domain of material science. The early 20th century saw archaeology begin to mature into a more disciplined profession, and with that came new techniques and a greater respect for context. Pioneers like Zachary Larouzic, who began as Milne's assistant and became the preeminent expert on the megaliths of Brittany, dedicated his life to their study. His work was crucial in shifting focus from simply collecting interesting objects to understanding their placement and relationship to the stones themselves. By carefully excavating around the dolmens, the stone table tombs often covered by earthen mounds known as tumuli, Larouzic and his contemporaries uncovered a wealth of burial goods. They found finely crafted jewelry made from shell and polished stone, beautifully decorated pottery vessels that likely held offerings for the afterlife, and flint arrowheads showing exquisite craftsmanship. These were not mere trinkets, they were grave goods placed with care to accompany important individuals into whatever lay beyond. This evidence powerfully supported the idea that the alignments were part of a vast funerary and ritual landscape, a place where the living communed with their revered ancestors. The single greatest revolution in understanding Carnac's age, however, came with the development of radiocarbon dating in the mid-20th century. This technology provided archaeologists with something they had never possessed before, an absolute chronology. By applying this method to fragments of charcoal from ancient hearths, animal bones from ritual feasts, and even human remains found within the tombs, scientists could finally assign firm dates to the construction and use of the monuments. The results were staggering, pushing the origin of the alignments back thousands of years earlier than many had presumed. We now know that the first stones were being erected around 4,500 years before the Common Era, a timeline that firmly places Carnac in the Neolithic period, long before the Celts or Druids ever arrived in the region. This scientific dating didn't just provide an age, it completely reshaped the historical narrative, forcing a re-evaluation of the capabilities and sophistication of these early farming societies. Modern archaeological investigations continue to peel back the layers of time with increasingly non-invasive and precise methods. Today, teams use ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry to map subterranean features without ever breaking ground, revealing the outlines of ancient pits, post holes, and pathways that are invisible to the naked eye. These high-tech surveys have shown that the visible stones are just the tip of the iceberg. They are part of a much more extensive and complex arrangement that has been lost to centuries of agricultural activity and stone robbing. Targeted excavations based on these surveys have yielded even more intimate clues about the builders. The discovery of a single, worn-out stone maul, a hammer used to shape the granite discarded at the base of a menhir, speaks volumes. It's a silent testament to the immense physical labor involved, a tool used by hands that last touched it over 6,000 years ago. Similarly, the analysis of pollen grains preserved in the soil has helped reconstruct the prehistoric environment, suggesting the alignments were constructed in a cleared landscape, possibly surrounded by small fields and pastures. Each of these discoveries, from a polished axe head to a charred grain of wheat, builds a mosaic of the people behind the stones. They were not mythical giants or enchanted armies. They were farmers and herders, skilled toolmakers and ambitious engineers. They lived in timber-framed houses, wore clothing of leather and woven plant fibers, and their diet consisted of the crops they grew and the animals they raised. The quality of the grave goods found in the tombs indicates a society with emerging social stratification, likely led by a class of elders or priests who possessed the astronomical knowledge and spiritual authority to direct such a monumental project. The artifacts tell a story of a people deeply connected to their land, their seasons, and their ancestors, a culture that expressed its deepest beliefs and its most advanced understanding of the world not on parchment or clay tablets, but in an enduring language of granite and earth. Every shard of pottery, every fragment of a tool, is a whispered conversation with these individuals, helping us to slowly, painstakingly, give a voice to the silent stones they left behind. While the stones themselves stand as the primary testament to this ancient culture, fully appreciating their significance requires a deeper dive into the world of their creators. This is where the Musée de Préhistoire de Carnac, the Museum of Prehistory, becomes an indispensable part of the journey. Located a short distance from the main alignments, the museum serves as the essential key that unlocks the human story behind the granite monuments. It transforms a visit from a simple walk among mysterious rocks into a profound encounter with a lost civilization. The museum's very architecture, modern and thoughtfully designed, acts as a gateway, preparing visitors to step back in time and understand the scale of the achievement they are about to witness in the landscape outside. The museum's core mission is one of preservation and context. Its collections are built upon the foundational work of early archaeologists like James Milne and Zachary Larouzic. housing an incredible array of artifacts meticulously recovered from excavations around the stones and the numerous burial mounds dotting the region. Here, the abstract concept of Neolithic people becomes stunningly tangible. You don't just hear about their tools, you see them up close, polished stone axes whose edges are still sharp, delicate arrowheads crafted with impossible precision from flint, and heavy stone mauls, their surfaces worn smooth by the hands that used them to shape the mighty menhirs. These are not merely displays, they are direct physical connections to the individuals who dedicated their lives to this grand project. One of the museum's most powerful exhibits focuses on the funerary practices revealed by the dolmens. Through carefully arranged displays, you encounter the actual grave goods buried with the dead thousands of years ago. There are beautifully decorated ceramic pots, their patterns and forms speaking of artistic tradition, which likely held offerings of food and drink for the afterlife. You see exquisite jewelry made from variscite, a green gemstone, and pendants crafted from shell, indicating trade networks and a desire for personal adornment that feels instantly familiar. These objects tell a story of belief, of a people who held complex views on death and the afterlife, and who honored their deceased leaders with items of great value and beauty. It powerfully reinforces the idea that the alignments were part of a vast sacred landscape of the living and the dead. To make this distant world accessible to all ages, the museum employs a range of interactive and immersive displays. Rather than relying solely on static glass cases, you might find a detailed diorama reconstructing a Neolithic village, complete with figures engaged in daily tasks like grinding grain, weaving, or tool-making. Touch screens allow visitors to explore the different theories about the stone's purposes, weighing the evidence for astronomical alignment against ritual use. There might be a full-scale replica of a burial chamber, allowing you to step inside and experience the atmosphere of a dolmen without disturbing the fragile originals. These interactive elements are designed not to dumb down the science, but to make the complex, evidence-based conclusions of archaeologists engaging and understandable for a non-specialist audience. Perhaps the museum's greatest achievement is how it contextualizes Carnac within the wider tapestry of European prehistory. It clearly illustrates that this was not an isolated phenomenon. Maps show the spread of megalithic culture along the Atlantic coast, from Portugal and Spain up through Brittany and across the English Channel to Britain and Ireland, connecting Carnac to sites like Stonehenge and Newgrange. This demonstrates that the people of Carnac were part of a vast, interconnected world, sharing ideas, technologies, and perhaps even religious beliefs across astonishing distances via sea routes. The museum helps you understand that the alignments are Brittany's unique and spectacular contribution to a pan-European cultural movement, a monumental expression of a shared Neolithic worldview that transformed the landscape of the entire continent. By the time a visitor steps out of the museum and back into the Breton sunlight to walk among the alignments, the experience is utterly transformed. The stones are no longer silent, anonymous rocks. They are the work of people you feel you have met through their tools and their jewelry. You can picture the teams dragging sledges, the crafters polishing axes, the communities gathering for a solstice sunrise. The museum provides the narrative, the characters, and the cultural backdrop, turning a mysterious landscape into a chapter of human history that is both awe-inspiring and deeply relatable. It ensures that the story of Carnac is not just about the stones that have survived, but about the ingenious, determined, and spiritually profound people who placed them there, whose legacy continues to inspire wonder and curiosity 65 centuries later. To truly grasp the grandeur of Carnac, it is essential to place it within a wider context, to see it not as an isolated wonder, but as part of a great wave of megalithic construction that swept across Neolithic Europe. When we compare it to its most famous contemporaries like Stonehenge and Avebury in England, we begin to see both a shared cultural impulse and the unique local expression that makes Carnac so extraordinary. These sites were not built in ignorance of one another. They represent different dialects of a common architectural and spiritual language spoken by societies connected by sea and shared ideas. The most immediate and obvious distinction is one of form. While Stonehenge is renowned for its iconic circle of towering lintel-topped trilithons and Avebury for its massive circular henge and ditch, Carnac is defined by its breathtaking linearity. Its rows of standalone menhirs stretch for kilometers in a relentless processional march across the landscape. This fundamental difference in design suggests a potential difference in function. Stonehenge's enclosed circle, with its carefully framed sightlines, creates a defined, almost theater-like space, perfect for an audience witnessing a ceremony at its center, particularly the dramatic solstice sunrise illuminating the altar stone. Carnac's alignments, by contrast, feel like a pathway inviting movement and participation. One did not simply stand and observe at Carnac. One was meant to walk amongst the stones, to be guided by them on a physical and spiritual journey toward a destination, perhaps the cromlech at an end. Despite these formal differences, the builders of all these sites demonstrated a staggering and similar mastery of Neolithic engineering. The transportation and erection of multi-ton stones was a universal challenge met with ingenious solutions. The methods employed, using wooden sledges, rollers, earthen ramps, and levers, would have been nearly identical whether in the chalk downs of Wiltshire or the granite heaths of Brittany. The societal implications were also the same. Each project required a highly organized, stratified society capable of commanding vast labor forces and planning on a multi-generational scale. The commitment to such backbreaking work signals that these monuments were absolutely central to the identity and beliefs of the people who built them. A profound similarity lies in their connection to the heavens. Archaeoastronomy reveals that all three sites are intricately tied to celestial events. Stonehenge's alignment to the summer solstice sunrise is world-famous. Avebury's massive avenues and circles also incorporate solar and lunar alignments. As we've explored, Carnac's rows precisely frame the solstice sunrises and sunsets, and may even track the more complex lunar standstill cycle. This shared preoccupation with astronomy points to a common driver behind these projects: a deep, spiritual need to understand and harmonize with the cycles of the cosmos. For these early farming communities, predicting the seasons was not abstract science. It was essential for survival, making a functioning calendar a sacred object. Their megaliths were this calendar, carved permanently into the earth itself. Yet Carnac's uniqueness shines through in its sheer, overwhelming scale. While Stonehenge impresses with its architectural complexity and Avebury with the immense size of its ditch and bank, Carnac is unparalleled in its numbers. With nearly 3,000 individual stones, it is the largest collection of standing stones anywhere in the world. This scale creates a qualitatively different experience. Walking the length of the Ménec alignments is an immersive, kilometer-long journey that no circular monument can replicate. The cumulative effect is one of awe, not just at a single structure, but at an entire landscape that has been deliberately and painstakingly engineered for a purpose we can still feel, even if we cannot fully name it. This makes Carnac not a sibling to Stonehenge, but a magnificent and unique cousin, speaking the same language but telling a vastly different and no less compelling story. The very ground upon which the Carnac alignments stand is not a passive stage but an active participant in the story, its geology and topography providing both the raw materials and the sacred canvas for this Neolithic masterpiece. To understand the choices made by the builders, one must first appreciate the unique character of the Carnac landscape, a place where the hard reality of granite meets the ever-shifting moods of the sea and sky. This region of southern Brittany is part of the Armorican Massif, an ancient geological formation where some of the oldest rocks in France are exposed at the surface. Over hundreds of millions of years, tectonic forces have pushed, folded, and uplifted this bedrock, creating a rolling terrain of low ridges and shallow valleys that run predominantly east to west, a feature that would prove crucial to the site's design. The primary material for the megaliths was readily available, local granite. This igneous rock, formed from cooled magma deep within the earth, is exceptionally hard and durable, qualities that made it both a challenge to work with and the perfect medium for a project intended to last for eternity. The builders did not have to look far for their quarry. They exploited natural granite outcrops known as tors that dotted the landscape. These outcrops, weathered by millennia of wind and rain, would naturally fracture along fault lines, providing slabs of stone that could be further shaped using heavy stone molds. The choice of local granite meant that every stone, no matter how massive, had a relatively short journey to its final resting place compared to the sarcens of Stonehenge, which were transported over 20 miles. This local sourcing was a practical necessity, but it also rooted the monument deeply in its place, making the alignments a literal extension of the land itself. The topography of the ridges played a definitive role in the layout of the rows. The three main groups of alignments, Ménec, Kermario, and Kerlescan, are precisely situated on a series of these gentle, parallel granite ridges. This was a deliberate and brilliant architectural decision. By placing the stones on these natural high points, the builders ensured their creation would be visible from great distances, dominating the visual landscape and broadcasting their presence to anyone approaching. Furthermore, the east-west orientation of these ridges provided a natural foundation for the alignment's most famous feature, their solar orientation. The ridges naturally aligned with the path of the sun across the sky, giving the builders a ready-made template for rows that would perfectly frame the solstice sunrises and sunsets. It was a perfect marriage of astronomical intention and geological opportunity. Beyond the immediate ridges, the broader topography offered symbolic and practical reasons for the site's location. The alignments are nestled in a peninsula with the Gulf of Morbihan to the south and the open Atlantic to the west. Water was a central element in the Neolithic worldview, a source of life, a means of transport, and likely a gateway to the spiritual realm. The proximity to the sea and the Gulf would have provided abundant resources, fish, shellfish, and salt, and facilitated trade and communication with other megalith-building cultures along the Atlantic coast. The land itself seems to funnel toward the water, and some researchers suggest the alignments could have served as a grand processional way, guiding people from the interior down toward the sacred shoreline for rituals linked to the sea, the moon, and the tides. When we consider the placement of the stones today, we must also remember that the Neolithic landscape looked quite different. Sea levels were lower, and what is now the Gulf of Morbihan was likely a more enclosed and navigable inland waterway. The vegetation was a mix of open heathland and managed woodland, cleared by these early farmers for their fields and pastures. This more open environment would have made the visual impact of the alignments even more dramatic and uninterrupted. Walking among the stones 6,000 years ago, one would have had clear sight lines along the entire length of the rows, with views stretching out to the sea on one side and toward the protective interior ridges on the other. The builders didn't fight against their environment. They listened to it, understood its rhythms, and used its innate structure to elevate their vision into one of the most powerful and enduring sacred landscapes our world has ever known. Interpreting the spiritual world of the Carnac builders requires us to step away from our modern separation of the practical and the sacred. For these Neolithic farmers, every aspect of existence was intertwined with the divine. The cycles of the sun and moon were not just mechanisms of a clock, but the visible breath of cosmic powers, and the land itself was a living, sacred entity. The alignments, therefore, are perhaps best understood as a permanent physical prayer, a monumental effort to communicate with, appease, and influence these forces that govern their survival. The most profound symbolic interpretation sees the rows of menhirs as powerful representations of the community's ancestors. Each standing stone, eternally rooted in the earth, could symbolize an individual forebear, their enduring presence a guarantee of continued protection and fertility for the land and people they left behind. The act of erecting these stones may have been a form of commemoration so potent it sought to anchor the spirit of the deceased to a specific place, ensuring they remained an active part of the community's world rather than fading into memory. Processions through these avenues of the dead would then become a powerful form of communion, a way for the living to walk among their lineage, seek guidance, and reinforce the bonds that tied generations together across millennia. This connection to ancestry is powerfully reinforced by the deliberate integration of burial sites into the megalithic complex. The presence of numerous dolmens and tumuli in close proximity to the alignments is a critical clue. These were not separate, unrelated sites. They formed a cohesive ritual landscape where the realms of the living and the dead intersected. The long, straight rows of menhirs could easily be envisioned as processional pathways leading directly to these houses of the ancestors, physically guiding participants toward the sacred space of the dead for funerary rites, offerings, or consultations. The symbolism here is potent. Just as the sun sets in the west and is reborn in the east, the soul's journey after death may have been mirrored by a physical journey along these stone pathways, moving from the world of the living toward the tomb, and by extension toward rebirth or the other world. This transforms the entire site from a simple cemetery into a dynamic map of cosmology, with the alignments acting as a bridge between two worlds. Beyond the veneration of ancestors, the stones likely held profound meaning as representations of deities or natural forces. The sheer, awe-inspiring size and masculine form of the larger menhirs suggest they could have been seen as embodiments of a powerful sky god, a father deity associated with the sun, storms, and authority. In contrast, the dolmens, the enclosed, womb-like burial chambers, might have symbolized an earth mother goddess, a figure of fertility, regeneration, and the underworld. The very act of placing the bones of the deceased back into the womb of the earth within a dolmen suggests a belief in cyclical rebirth, a return to the source for regeneration. This creates a complete spiritual ecosystem within the landscape, the towering male stones of the alignments reaching for the sky, and the enclosed female dolmens receiving the dead back into the earth, a perpetual dance of complementary forces ensuring the balance and continuity of life itself. The arrangement of the stones themselves is dense with symbolic intention. The fascinating, subtle serpentine curves within some of the rows are unlikely to be accidental. Across countless cultures, the serpent is a potent symbol of renewal, wisdom, and chthonic power. Its ability to shed its skin making it a universal emblem of rebirth and transformation. A processional path, Chinese letter ED like a snake, would not only physically slow down the participant, preparing them mentally for a ritual, but would also symbolically align them with this powerful force of regeneration. Furthermore, the deliberate grading of the stones, with their height often increasing toward the center of a row, creates a powerful visual effect. This could symbolize a pathway of ascension, leading the participant toward a higher spiritual state, or it might represent a congregation gathering around a central, more important figure, perhaps a deified chief or a primary ancestor, emphasizing hierarchy and social order within the spiritual realm. Ultimately, the greatest spiritual symbolism may lie in the harmonious alignment of the human made with the God-given. The careful orientation of the rows toward celestial events and significant features in the natural landscape, a distinctive hill, a source of water, the sea, shows a deep reverence for the existing sacred geography. The builders were not conquering nature with their monument, they were accentuating it, collaborating with it to create a place of amplified power. A solstice sunrise framed perfectly between two stones is more than a calendar marker. It is a moment of celestial alignment where the divine power of the sun is channeled directly into the human realm through the architecture of the stones. This synergy between the earthly and the cosmic suggests a worldview in which humanity saw itself as an integral part of a vast, animate universe, responsible for maintaining harmony through ritual and reverence. The Carnac alignments stand as their timeless sermon in stone, a permanent offering to the forces that gave them life and a breathtakingly ambitious attempt to weave their community's story directly into the fabric of the cosmos. To fully appreciate the Carnac alignments, we must look beyond the silent rows of menhirs and toward the gentle, human-made hills that rise from the landscape nearby. These are the tumuli, the monumental burial mounds that form an integral part of the complex, and they hold crucial clues to the spiritual world of the builders. The most imposing of these is the tumulus of St. Michel, a colossal earthwork that dominates the skyline. Constructed around 4,500 years before the Common Era, this is not a natural hill but a meticulously engineered structure. Its scale is immense, 125 meters long, 60 meters wide, and 12 meters high, requiring an estimated 35,000 cubic meters of stone and earth. This was a project of staggering ambition, comparable in effort to the stone rows themselves, and it speaks volumes about the cultural importance of honoring the dead. Within these vast mounds, archaeologists have uncovered the tangible remains of the people who built Carnac. The tumulus of St. Michel, for instance, was not a mass grave but a sophisticated mausoleum. Excavations revealed a central vault constructed from massive stone slabs, a burial chamber that was accessed by a narrow, roofed passageway known as a dromos. Inside, the skeletal remains were found accompanied by a rich array of grave goods, a practice that reveals a complex belief system concerning the afterlife. These were not mere tokens, they were items of great value and significance. Finely crafted polished stone axes, their surfaces smoothed to a sheen, were placed alongside elegant vases of pottery, often decorated with intricate patterns. Jewelry made from rare materials like variscite, a green gemstone traded from distant regions, and caloes, a turquoise-colored stone, accompanied the deceased. These offerings suggest a belief that the individual would require their status, tools, and wealth in the world beyond, and that their journey was one of great importance to the entire community. Another significant mound, the tumulus of Kerkado, offers even more direct evidence of the connection between the world of the dead and the celestial cycles observed in the alignments. This smaller but equally fascinating mound, located just south of the Kermario alignments, contains a central dolmen, a stone table tomb covered by its earthen pyramid. What makes Kerkado extraordinary is the presence of a solitary standing menhir perched right on top of the mound, a powerful symbol linking the burial site to the wider megalithic complex. Furthermore, the entrance to the tomb passage is precisely oriented toward the southeast, aligning with the sunrise on the winter solstice. This is not a coincidence. It means that on the shortest day of the year, the first rays of the reborn sun would have shone directly down the passageway, illuminating the dark interior chamber where the ancestors lay. This breathtaking alignment fuses astronomy, architecture, and spirituality into a single, profound statement about death and rebirth. The proximity of these grand tumuli to the stone rows is the final, critical piece of evidence that we are looking at a single, unified ritual landscape. The alignments do not exist in isolation. They are physically and symbolically connected to these houses of the ancestors. One compelling theory is that the long, straight rows of menhirs acted as sacred processional pathways, guiding mourners and celebrants from the realm of the living, perhaps from a village site or a gathering place, directly toward these burial mounds. The journey would have been a powerful physical and spiritual experience, walking between the lines of stones, feeling their immense age and presence, all while moving toward the final resting place of the revered dead. The culmination of this journey would have been a ceremony at the foot of the tumulus or even within the burial chamber itself, creating a direct link between the community's rituals and their veneration of ancestry. This integrated view transforms our understanding of Carnac from a collection of separate monuments into a coherent and sophisticated sacred geography. The landscape itself was engineered to reflect a complete cosmology. The rows of menhirs reaching for the sky and tracking the sun and moon represented the cyclical, celestial order of the universe and the enduring presence of the ancestors whose spirits were perhaps believed to reside within the stones. The tumuli, as man-made mountains embracing the earth, represented the gateway to the underworld, the place of return and regeneration. The rituals performed here, whether funerary processions, solstice celebrations, or offerings to the dead, would have bound the community together across generations, reinforcing social order, spiritual beliefs, and a shared identity rooted in the very land they had shaped. The stones and the mounds are two halves of a whole, a permanent dialogue between the living and the dead, the earth and the sky, that gave meaning and order to the Neolithic world. Yet for all their enduring strength, these granite sentinels now face a set of challenges their Neolithic builders could never have conceived. The greatest threat is no longer the passage of millennia, but the pressures of the modern world. The very fame and wonder that draw us to Carnac also place it in peril. Each year, hundreds of thousands of visitors walk among the stones, and while their footsteps are motivated by respect and curiosity, the cumulative effect is one of gradual degradation. Soil compaction around the bases of the menhirs destabilizes their ancient foundations, while the oils from countless hands touching the stones accelerate the natural erosion of the granite. It is a heartbreaking paradox. The love for the site is quite literally wearing it away. Beyond tourism, the encroachment of the modern landscape presents a constant battle. Urbanization and agricultural expansion press in from all sides, with the vibrations from nearby roads and construction posing a subtle but insidious risk to the delicate equilibrium of stones that have stood for over 6,000 years. Even the natural world, left unchecked, becomes an agent of destruction. Ivy and other vegetation may seem picturesque winding around a menhir, but their roots work their way into microscopic fissures in the stone. When these roots absorb water and expand with the freezing and thawing of winter, they act like tiny wedges, slowly but relentlessly prying the granite apart from within. Recognizing this urgent need for protection, the French government and local authorities have implemented a multifaceted conservation strategy. The most visible and impactful measure has been the strict control of access. While the sites of Ménec, Kermario, and Kerlescan remain awe-inspiring to view from the designated pathways, free-roaming access among the stones themselves is now heavily restricted, especially during the peak tourist season. Visitors during these periods can only enter the fenced-off core areas as part of a guided tour. This system, while perhaps disappointing to those hoping for an unrestricted walk, is absolutely vital. It allows the fragile soil ecosystem to recover and ensures that the impact of human presence is carefully managed and minimized. The conservation work itself is a delicate blend of high-tech science and painstaking manual labor. Archaeologists and conservators use drone photography and 3D laser scanning to create incredibly detailed digital models of the entire site. These models allow them to monitor the slightest movement or tilt in any stone over time, identifying potential problems long before they become visible to the naked eye. On the ground, the work is remarkably hands-off and gentle. Specialists carefully remove damaging vegetation by hand, avoiding any chemical treatments that could seep into the ground. They monitor soil moisture and stability, and in rare cases where a menhir is deemed to be in genuine danger of falling, a team may perform a careful intervention to stabilize its foundation, using methods that are reversible and cause the least possible disturbance to the original Neolithic work. This unwavering commitment to preservation was formally recognized in 1996 when the Carnac alignments were inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This designation is far more than an honorary title. It is a global pledge to safeguard this irreplaceable treasure for all of humanity. It provides access to international funding and expertise, and places the site within a network of the world's most significant cultural landmarks, ensuring that its protection remains a priority not just for France but for the entire world. The stones of Carnac have silently witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the transformation of landscapes, and the entire sweep of human history. Our generation now bears the responsibility to ensure they continue to stand, not as a relic behind glass, but as a living, breathing monument that can inspire awe and wonder for countless generations yet to come. Planning a visit to this ancient landscape requires a thoughtful approach to ensure your experience is both profound and respectful of the site's incredible fragility. The main alignments Ménec, Kermario, and Kerlescan are easily accessible from the town of Carnac, with clear signage guiding you to each location. To truly protect the stones, free access to walk among the rows is now carefully managed. During the low season, from October to March, you can often wander the pathways at your leisure, enjoying the quiet solitude of the site. However, from April through September, the core areas of the alignments are fenced off, and entering them requires joining a guided tour. This system is not a restriction but a vital conservation measure, allowing the delicate soil around the stones to recover and preventing further erosion from the thousands of pairs of feet that would otherwise compact the earth and destabilize these ancient monoliths. These guided tours, available in multiple languages, are far from a simple walk. They are an invaluable educational experience. Knowledgeable guides bring the Neolithic world to life, pointing out subtle astronomical alignments you might miss on your own, explaining the latest archaeological theories, and sharing the local legends that have grown around the stones. They will lead you along carefully maintained gravel paths that provide the perfect vantage points for photography while ensuring you don't accidentally cause harm. Before you even set out for the stones, a visit to the Museum of Prehistory in Carnac is an essential first step. This modern, world-class museum provides the crucial context that transforms the stones from mysterious rocks into a human story. Seeing the actual polished axes, jewelry, and pottery recovered from the nearby tumuli allows you to connect the silent landscape outside to the vibrant, skilled culture that created it. When you are on site, practicing respectful tourism is the best way to honor the builder's legacy. This means adhering to a few simple but crucial rules. Resist the powerful temptation to touch the granite surfaces. The natural oils on our hands, however clean, contribute to the slow weathering of the stone. Always stay on the marked paths, as stepping off them damages the protected flora and contributes to soil erosion around the bases of the menhirs. Flying drones is strictly prohibited, as the vibrations and potential for accident pose an unacceptable risk. And of course, never engage in the destructive act of graffiti or attempt to remove a piece of stone as a souvenir. These actions are not just disrespectful, they are irrevocably damaging. The goal is to leave no trace of your visit except for your photographs and memories. Beyond the famous alignments, the surrounding region of Morbihan is a treasure trove of lesser-known but equally fascinating megalithic sites. Consider venturing out to explore the incredible broken menhir of Lochmariaca, a single colossal stone that would have been the tallest in Europe before it fell and fractured, or the intricate carvings within the table des Marchands dolmen. Many of these sites are quieter and offer a more intimate experience. The best times to visit for light and atmosphere are either early in the morning or late in the afternoon, when the low sun casts long, dramatic shadows between the rows, heightening the sense of mystery and making for stunning photographs. The quality of the light during these golden hours seems to soften the centuries, allowing your imagination to bridge the gap between our time and theirs. Your visit to Carnac is a privilege, a chance to walk in the footsteps of the Neolithic builders and countless generations who have been drawn to this place. By choosing to explore with care and respect, you become part of the solution, a guardian of this irreplaceable link to our shared human past. This ensures that these silent sentinels will continue to stand against the Breton sky, not just for us, but for the curious minds and wondering eyes of the thousands of generations yet to come, who will also seek answers and inspiration from these ancient stones. This profound sense of mystery emanating from the ancient stones has acted as a powerful muse, captivating the creative spirit of artists, writers, and filmmakers for generations. They have looked upon these silent rows and seen not just granite, but a canvas for exploring the deepest themes of time, memory, and the human condition. The allure of Carnac lies in its perfect ambiguity. It is a story without a definitive text, inviting each new interpreter to project their own visions onto its weathered surface. In the late 19th century, the post-impressionist painter Paul Gauguin found himself drawn to Brittany, seeking an escape from what he saw as a corrupt and artificial modern civilization. He was in search of a more primal, authentic existence, and he discovered it in the region's rugged landscape and enduring folk traditions. For Gauguin, the Carnac alignments were not mere antiquities, they were powerful, living symbols of this primordial world. His painting, The Yellow Christ, captures this fusion, placing the biblical scene within a distinctively Breton autumn landscape, one that is undoubtedly informed by the presence of the megaliths that dotted his surroundings. While the stones themselves might not be explicitly depicted in his most famous works, their spirit permeates his Breton period. They represented the kind of raw, mystical, and pre-Christian energy he so desperately sought, becoming a foundational element in his artistic mythology of Brittany as a place of ancient magic and untouched tradition. This artistic fascination continued into the 20th century, taking on new forms in the world of literature. The stones have served as a potent backdrop for novels weaving together history, fantasy, and mystery. Authors have been inspired by the eerie, otherworldly atmosphere of the site, using it as a setting for narratives that bridge the gap between the past and the present. In these stories, the alignments often become portals or catalysts, perhaps holding the key to ancient secrets or unleashing long-dormant forces. They are frequently depicted as a place where characters experience profound revelations or confront the sheer weight of deep time, their personal dramas unfolding against a backdrop that has witnessed millennia. This literary treatment reinforces the site's role as a place where the boundaries between eras feel thin and permeable, where the modern individual can somehow touch the consciousness of the distant past. The cinematic lens has perhaps done the most to shape the modern popular image of the Carnac Stones, particularly through the compelling medium of documentary filmmaking. Countless documentaries have trained their cameras on the rows, using sweeping aerial shots to convey their breathtaking scale and intimate close-ups to highlight their textured, human-made nature. These films often employ dramatic, mysterious music and thoughtful narration to cultivate an aura of awe, presenting the site as one of archaeology's greatest enigmas. They give a global audience a virtual pilgrimage, walking them through the leading theories astronomical, religious, funerary, and showcasing the latest archaeological technology from ground-penetrating radar to three-dimensional scanning. Through this lens, Carnac is presented as an active puzzle, a crime scene from prehistory where scientists are the detectives patiently gathering clues. Beyond factual programming, the stone's striking visual presence has made them an irresistible location for feature films and television series, particularly within genres that thrive on a sense of ancient wonder and unseen power. While perhaps not as frequently featured as Stonehenge, Carnac's unique appearance, the endless parallel rows offers a distinctive and unforgettable visual. A production might use the alignments to establish a scene of profound antiquity, to suggest a landing site for otherworldly visitors, or to create a moment of quiet reflection for a character unmoored from modern life. The mere image of a person standing small amidst the vast, grid-like array of menhirs is a powerful cinematic shorthand for contemplating humanity's place in the vast flow of time. Ultimately, whether through paint, prose, or film, these artistic interpretations all gravitate toward the same core themes: mystery, endurance, and the sublime. Artists are less concerned with the archaeological specifics of solstice alignments or burial practices, and more captivated by the emotional and philosophical resonance of the stones. They see in Carnac a sublime confrontation with the infinite, a physical manifestation of humanity's enduring desire to create meaning and leave a mark that outlasts individual lives. These creative works do not provide answers to the factual questions of who built them or why. Instead, they amplify the questions themselves, reminding us that some mysteries are too profound to be solved by science alone. They ensure that the stones live a double life, as a subject of scientific inquiry and as a timeless symbol in our collective imagination, forever representing the haunting, beautiful, and unresolved dialogue between the past and the present. Of course, the grand and silent nature of Carnac has always been a fertile ground for the imagination, leading some to look beyond conventional archaeology for an explanation. This brings us to the realm of highly speculative yet undeniably popular theories that connect the stones to legendary lost civilizations, most notably Atlantis or the mythical northern paradise of Hyperborea. Proponents of these ideas often argue that the sheer scale and precision of the alignments are too advanced for what we traditionally understand about Neolithic farmers, suggesting instead that they are the work of a sophisticated, pre-existing culture that was later lost to time, perhaps to a great cataclysm like the one that supposedly sank Atlantis. The allure of connecting Carnac to Atlantis is powerful. The story of an advanced island nation, first mentioned by the philosopher Plato, has captivated people for millennia. Those who support this link might point to the geographic proximity of Brittany to the Atlantic Ocean, suggesting that survivors of this sunken continent could have traveled eastward and imparted their advanced knowledge of astronomy and megalithic construction to the local population. They might argue that the complex solar and lunar alignments are a form of encoded knowledge, a legacy from a civilization that understood the secrets of the universe. The idea transforms the stones from a local marvel into a fragment of a global, epic history, a piece of a puzzle that spans oceans and millennia. Similarly, the less common but equally fascinating theory of a Hyperborean connection draws from ancient Greek texts that described a perfect, heavenly land beyond the north wind, inhabited by a race of giants or god-like beings who lived in eternal happiness. Some alternative historians have speculated that these Hyperboreans were not mythical but a real, advanced prehistoric people who migrated south, bringing their culture with them. In this narrative, the Carnac alignments could be seen as an outpost of this northern civilization, a southern marker of their influence, built according to celestial principles known only to them. This theory often gets intertwined with esoteric and sometimes problematic racial ideologies from the 19th and 20th centuries, which sought to attribute all major cultural advances to a single, superior, and often invented ancient race. While these stories are compelling on a mythical level, they face an insurmountable wall when scrutinized by the tools of modern archaeology and critical history. The first and most significant problem is the complete lack of material evidence. Not a single artifact, tool, inscription, or piece of pottery excavated at Carnac or anywhere in Brittany shows any stylistic or technological influence from a culture outside of the well-documented Neolithic traditions of Atlantic Europe. Every item found, from the polished stone axes to the distinctive pottery, is utterly consistent with what we know about the people living in that region during that specific period. Furthermore, Plato's account of Atlantis is widely regarded by historians as a philosophical allegory about hubris and the ideal state, not a historical document. There is no credible geological evidence for a large landmass sinking in the Atlantic Ocean within the time frame of human civilization. Perhaps the most damaging argument against these lost civilization theories is that they inherently diminish the stunning achievement of the local Neolithic people. To attribute Carnac to Atlanteans or Hyperboreans is to rob the indigenous inhabitants of Brittany of their intellectual and spiritual ingenuity. It perpetuates an outdated and condescending notion that so-called primitive Stone Age cultures were incapable of such sophistication on their own, that they must have been guided by a more advanced and often imaginary outside force. This ignores the overwhelming evidence of their capability. We have their quarries, their tools, their settlements, and their tombs. The archaeological record shows a clear, gradual evolution of megalithic construction in the region, not a sudden, inexplicable injection of knowledge from a mysterious source. Yet, it is important to acknowledge why these speculative theories maintain such a powerful grip on the popular imagination. They speak to a deep human desire for romance and mystery, for a history that is more dramatic and epic than the slow, meticulous work of archaeology often reveals. The idea of a lost golden age is fundamentally more thrilling than the evidence-based story of a successful, settled farming society. These myths fill the silent gaps with sound and color, offering a complete, albeit fictional, narrative where science can only offer fragments and probabilities. They remind us that the stones of Carnac are not just geological or archaeological objects. They are also cultural symbols that we project our own hopes, fears, and fantasies onto. In the end, the truth of Carnac, that ordinary Neolithic people achieved something extraordinary through communal effort, careful observation, and profound belief, is in its own way far more miraculous and inspiring than any myth of a lost world. For all the compelling elegance of the astronomical theories, a closer examination of the Carnac alignments reveals a host of intriguing imperfections and puzzling details that resist any single neat explanation. These anomalies are not flaws in the Neolithic design, but rather fascinating complications that deepen the mystery and remind us that our modern interpretations are, at best, educated guesses at the intentions of a long-vanished culture. The rows, when surveyed with modern precision, are not always perfectly straight. While their overall orientation is clear, many lines exhibit subtle serpentine curves or slight, deliberate deviations. These aren't mistakes from clumsy construction. They appear intentional, perhaps designed to accommodate the natural topography of the granite ridges or to create a specific visual or experiential effect for those walking along them. A processional path, a T Chinese letter S like a snake, would physically slow a participant down, creating a sense of ceremony and building anticipation before reaching a ritual endpoint like a cromlech or a burial mound. Scattered amongst the grand regiments of standing stones are solitary menhirs that stand apart from the main rows, often positioned at odd angles or in seemingly isolated locations. The purpose of these outlier stones is a persistent puzzle. Some researchers propose they could have been territorial markers, denoting the boundary of a sacred space or the lands of a particular clan. Others suggest they might be older or younger than the alignments themselves, perhaps the first attempts at megalithic construction in the area or later additions that were never fully integrated into the grand plan. Another compelling idea is that these lone sentinels served as foresights or backsights for astronomical observations, providing a fixed point from which to view the sunrise or sunset over a specific arrangement of stones in the main rows, adding another layer of complexity to the site's potential use as a calendar. Perhaps the most significant challenge to a purely astronomical model are the patterns and structures that simply don't fit. While many rows do align with solstice points, an almost equal number do not, their orientations pointing toward seemingly insignificant points on the horizon. Furthermore, the site contains features that are difficult to explain as part of a celestial observatory. Some groupings of stones form clear geometric shapes like crescents or cloverleaf patterns, particularly in the Kerlescan sector. These shapes may have held deep symbolic meaning related to a forgotten cosmology representing a deity, a celestial body, or a spiritual concept that we can no longer decipher. The variation in the shapes of the menhirs themselves is also telling. While many are roughly phallic, others are distinctly flat and table-like, and some even bear faint, weathered carvings of crooks and axes, suggesting a diversity of function and symbolism that a single-purpose theory cannot easily contain. These unresolved oddities are the lifeblood of ongoing archaeological research, ensuring that the final word on Carnac's purpose is never written. Each anomaly is a clue that prevents us from settling on a comfortable conclusion. The deviations in the rows suggest the builders were working with a more complex set of priorities than simply mirroring the sky, perhaps incorporating geomancy, the art of aligning structures with spiritual or energetic features of the landscape itself. The outlier stones whisper of a social or territorial function that intertwined with the site's spiritual role. The non-astronomical patterns are a stark reminder that we are likely only perceiving a fraction of the site's original complexity, and that much of its meaning is rooted in a symbolic language that is now utterly lost to us. It is this glorious, frustrating incompleteness that keeps the stones powerfully alive, not as a solved equation, but as an eternal question mark carved into the Breton earth. Walking among the Carnac alignments today, one is struck by an overwhelming silence, broken only by the wind and the distant sounds of modern life. But what if this quiet landscape was once filled with intentional sound, and the very arrangement of these stones was designed to shape and amplify it? This leads us to one of the most intriguing and sensory theories about the site, that the megaliths possess remarkable acoustic properties, transforming the alignments into a vast, open-air instrument for ceremonial use. Imagine the scene not as one of utter silence, but as a space resonating with chants, drum beats, or the blast of a horn, with the stones themselves acting to bend and channel these sounds in supernatural ways. This idea moves beyond the visual spectacle of the alignments to consider how our ancient ancestors might have engaged with their sacred landscape through hearing. Sound, particularly rhythmic chanting or music, is a powerful tool for altering consciousness, fostering communal bonding, and reaching spiritual states. If the builders of Carnac understood even the basic principles of how sound waves interact with solid objects and specific landscapes, they could have engineered their monument to enhance these effects dramatically. The parallel rows, standing at varying heights and distances, could act as a series of baffles and reflectors, similar to the walls of a modern concert hall but on a colossal outdoor scale. Anecdotal evidence from modern visitors and researchers provides some fascinating, though preliminary, support for this concept. People have reported unusual auditory effects while standing at specific points within the alignments. In certain spots, a quiet conversation can be heard with surprising clarity dozens of meters away, as if the sound is being funneled along a stone corridor. In other locations, a single handclap might produce a short, sharp echo that seems to come from a specific direction, or a sustained tone might create a faint but perceptible buzzing or reverberation. These experiences suggest the site's geometry does indeed influence acoustics, creating pockets of amplified sound and areas of strange quietude. To move beyond anecdote, researchers have begun employing sophisticated tools to map these potential soundscapes. Archaeoacoustics, a specialized field that studies the acoustic properties of ancient sites, has started to turn its attention to Carnac. Using audio equipment like omnidirectional speakers and sensitive microphones, scientists can broadcast calibrated sounds from one point in the alignments and measure exactly how the sound waves are reflected, diffracted, or absorbed by the stones. Early experiments, while not conclusive, have shown that the rows do not create a single, uniform acoustic effect. Instead, they generate a complex pattern of sound interference. The regular spacing of the menhirs can cause certain frequencies to be amplified through constructive interference, while other frequencies are dampened or cancelled out. This could mean that a specific rhythm played on a drum or a particular note sung by a chant might have been powerfully reinforced by the architecture, while other sounds were swallowed by the landscape. The potential for such sound manipulation adds a profound layer of intentionality to the construction. It suggests the Neolithic builders might have been not just astronomers and engineers, but also master architects of sensory experience, designing a space that engaged sight, movement, and sound in a holistic ritual package. The act of processing through the stones during a ceremony would have been a dynamic auditory journey, with the quality of the sound constantly shifting around the participants, enhancing the emotional and spiritual power of the ritual. This theory invites us to listen to the silence of Carnac not as an absence, but as a pregnant pause, an auditorium waiting for the performance to begin once more. Throughout the year, the Carnac alignments undergo a breathtaking metamorphosis, each season painting the ancient stones with a unique palette of light and mood that fundamentally alters their character and our perception of them. In the deep stillness of winter, the low-hanging sun of Brittany casts an entirely different kind of magic across the heath. Its rays, pale and golden, strike the landscape at a sharp angle, stretching the shadows of the menhirs into impossibly long, dark fingers that creep across the frosted grass. These elongated silhouettes connect the rows in an intricate web of darkness, making the entire complex feel more densely packed, more interconnected, and profoundly more mysterious. The low light also highlights every imperfection, every weathering mark and lichen stain on the granite surfaces, emphasizing the incredible age and texture of each stone. On rare days when a dusting of snow settles on the capstones and collects in the lee of the monoliths, the site is transformed into a stark, monochrome engraving, silent and utterly majestic, a visual echo of the immense stretches of time it has witnessed. As the wheel of the year turns toward spring, a surge of life sweeps through the alignments, offering a powerful symbol of renewal that the builders would have understood intimately. The fields between the granite rows explode in a carpet of wildflowers, yellow gorse, purple heather, and delicate white blooms, their vibrant colors creating a stunning contrast against the gray stone. This explosion of flora softens the austere geometry of the site, weaving the rigid lines of the menhirs into the living tapestry of the natural world. The increasing strength of the sun brings a new quality of light, washing the stones in a clean, bright clarity that reveals their true colors, from bluish-gray to streaks of rose quartz and flecks of black mica. This season of growth visually reinforces one of the key theories about Carnac's purpose: its deep connection to the agricultural cycle and the fertile rebirth of the land that sustained its creators. Summer presents the alignments at their most accessible, and yet, at high noon, they're most paradoxically two-dimensional. Under the direct overhead sun of a clear July day, the shadows retreat to small pools at the base of each stone, flattening the scene and reducing the sense of depth. While this is the time of greatest tourist activity, the true magic of summer reveals itself at the bookends of the day. At dawn, particularly around the summer solstice, the theory of astronomical alignment becomes a breathtaking reality. The rising sun, precisely framed between the parallel rows, fires a laser-straight beam of light down the stone avenues, illuminates the morning mists, and sets the dew on the grass ablaze with a million points of light. It is a moment of undeniable theatrical power, a celestial spectacle that feels orchestrated, confirming that these stones are not randomly placed but are in a deliberate and profound conversation with the cosmos. Then comes autumn, the season that seems to most deeply enhance the site's inherent atmosphere of mystery and melancholy. As the days shorten, a haunting, ethereal beauty descends upon Carnac. The early mornings are often shrouded in thick, silent sea mists that drift in from the nearby Gulf of Morbihan. These mists swallow the far ends of the alignments, isolating individual stones or small clusters, making them appear as ghostly sentinels adrift in a formless white void. The effect is disorienting and profoundly peaceful, dissolving the grand plan of the rose and encouraging a more intimate, contemplative engagement with each monolith. The low, slanting light of an autumn afternoon, rich and honeyed, gilds the eastern faces of the stones while plunging the western sides into deep blue shadow, accentuating their three-dimensionality and making them feel more like individual sculptures. The rust-colored ferns and dying bracken that surround them complete a palette of gold, gray, and bronze, a visual poem about the cycle of decay and the approach of the long, dark winter. For the Neolithic builders, these dramatic seasonal transformations were not merely aesthetic. They were the very heartbeat of their existence, rich with symbolic meaning that was likely woven into their rituals and beliefs. The weak winter sun and long shadows could have symbolized the world of the ancestors, a time when the veil between the living and the dead was believed to be at its thinnest, making the alignments a potent place for communication with the other side. The explosive rebirth of spring would have been a time for ceremonies of fertility and planting, perhaps processions through the stones to bless the seeds and ensure the sun's continued strength. The triumphant peak of the summer solstice was undoubtedly a moment of supreme celestial power, a validation of their astronomical knowledge and a time for great communal gatherings to celebrate the sun at the height of its life-giving strength. And the fading light and mists of autumn, a season of harvest and introspection, may have represented a time to honor the dead, to give thanks for the bounty of the land, and to prepare spiritually for the inward journey of winter. The stones, in their eternal silence, thus become a permanent calendar of feeling, their changing face throughout the year reflecting the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth that defined the Neolithic world. Though the hands that raised them belong to a world 6,000 years gone, the Carnac stones are far from a relic confined to the history books. In a powerful and poignant evolution, these ancient monoliths have been embraced by a new generation of spiritual seekers, transforming the site from a static archaeological wonder into a living, breathing cultural monument that continues to pulsate with meaning. Today, the alignments serve as a profound touchstone for modern neo-pagan groups, druidic orders, and individuals drawn to earth-based spirituality, who find in the silent rose not a mystery to be solved, but a sacred space to be experienced. They approach the stones not with the archaeologist's trowel, but with a reverent heart, seeking to reconnect with the same elemental forces that inspired the original builders. The most visible expression of this modern reverence occurs during the solar milestones that mark the Neolithic year. On the mornings of the summer and winter solstices, the alignments once again become a stage for human ritual. As the first rays of the solstice sun break the horizon, carefully aligning with the ancient rose, you might find small groups gathered in quiet ceremony. They are not reenactors trying to replicate a lost past. Rather, they are practitioners using the power of the place and the moment to honor cycles of nature that are as relevant today as they were in the Stone Age. The rituals are often deeply personal and eclectic, drawing from a blend of reconstructed Celtic traditions, intuitive earth spirituality, and a universal respect for the sun's life-giving power. There might be gentle chanting, moments of silent meditation, or the sharing of blessings for the season ahead. For these individuals, the precise astronomical alignment confirmed by science validates an intuitive truth, that this place is inherently sacred, designed for communion with the cosmos. This contemporary use creates a fascinating and sometimes delicate dialogue between different groups who value Carnac. On one side are the academic archaeologists and conservators, dedicated to protecting the physical integrity of the stones and uncovering their historical truth through empirical evidence. On the other are the modern spiritual practitioners who are less concerned with the factual why and more focused on the experiential how the space makes them feel, how it facilitates a connection to something larger than themselves. While these perspectives can seem at odds, there is a growing mutual respect. many modern pagans are deeply knowledgeable about the archaeology and are committed to leave no trace practices, ensuring their rituals cause no damage. Conversely, many archaeologists now acknowledge that the site's enduring power as a place of awe and wonder is a significant part of its cultural value, a thread of emotional continuity stretching across 65 centuries. The appeal of Carnac for these practices is not merely its age, but its unique atmosphere of serene power. Unlike the enclosed circle of Stonehenge, the long, parallel rows of Carnac create a natural pathway for meditation and processional movement. Walking the length of an alignment becomes a form of moving meditation, a physical journey that mirrors a spiritual one. The repetitive, rhythmic structure of the stones focuses the mind, while the sheer scale of the landscape opens the heart. Many visitors, even those without a defined spiritual practice, report feeling a palpable shift in energy among the menhirs, a sense of peace, timelessness, or profound connection. This intuitive response suggests the builders succeeded in creating something that transcends its original purpose, a work of art and architecture that speaks to a deep, universal human need for sacred space. In this way, the stones have become a unique kind of palimpsest, a document on which layer upon layer of meaning has been inscribed over time. The original Neolithic purpose forms the foundational text, now mostly illegible to us. Over that, centuries of local Christian folklore added a new layer with the legend of Saint Corneli. And now, a contemporary layer of neo-pagan and personal spiritual practice is being gently written, not on the stones themselves, but in the temporary, ethereal actions of those who gather there. This doesn't erase the past, it enriches it, demonstrating that a place can hold multiple truths simultaneously. The alignments are an archaeological site, a national heritage monument, a tourist destination, and an active temple all at once. This ongoing, evolving relationship ensures that the stones are not frozen in time but remain a vital part of a living cultural conversation, a silent yet potent catalyst for wonder, reverence, and introspection in our modern world. Despite the remarkable progress made by archaeologists, the Carnac Stones guard their most intimate secrets with an unwavering silence, leaving us with a series of profound and tantalizing unanswered questions. The most fundamental of these is the exact, singular reason for their construction. While the astronomical, funerary, and ritual theories are all compelling and likely interconnected, we lack a definitive hieroglyph or Rosetta Stone that proclaims the primary purpose. Was the site first and foremost a colossal calendar designed to predict solstices with agricultural necessity in mind? Or was its initial impulse purely spiritual, conceived as a sacred pathway to commune with ancestors whose tombs were integrated later? Perhaps it was an evolving project whose purpose shifted over the centuries it was in use, beginning as a burial ground and expanding into a celestial observatory as their understanding of the skies grew. Without a written record from the builders themselves, we are left to interpret the physical evidence, and while it points strongly in certain directions, it never delivers a final verdict. This ambiguity is the core of Carnac's enduring mystery. Beyond the overarching purpose, the meaning behind specific, anomalous stone placements continues to baffle experts. Why do certain rows incorporate subtle serpentine curves rather than maintaining perfect straight lines? What was the intended function of the solitary outlier menhirs that stand apart from the main regiments, often at peculiar angles? Some stones bear faint, weathered carvings, cup marks, crooks, or axe shapes whose symbolism is now completely lost to us. Were these sacred symbols clan markers or a form of primitive notation? The geometric patterns found in smaller clusters, particularly in the Kerlescan group, suggest a complex symbolic language we can no longer decipher. These aren't mere decorations, they are likely crucial clues to a sophisticated cosmology, a way of thinking about the world that linked the earth to the heavens, the living to the dead, in a code we have only begun to crack. Each of THESE Chinese letter is a piece of a puzzle for which we have lost the box lid showing the complete picture. A broader, and perhaps more revolutionary, unknown is whether Carnac was an isolated marvel or the central node in a vast, coordinated network of megalithic sites. The similarities in construction techniques and astronomical knowledge shared across Atlantic Europe, from Portugal's Almenda's cromlech to Ireland's Newgrange and Britain's Stonehenge, are too striking to ignore. This suggests a shared cultural milieu, a megalithic civilization connected by sea routes that facilitated the exchange of ideas. But was this a loose sharing of concepts, or was there a more deliberate, coordinated effort? Could Carnac have been a primary school of astronomical knowledge, a place so advanced that pilgrimages were made to learn its secrets, which were then taken home and adapted to local landscapes? The chronological timeline shows Carnac predates its famous cousins, adding weight to the idea that it could have been a catalyst, an inspirational prototype that sparked a megalithic movement across the continent. Proving a direct connection, however, remains elusive. Finally, the most haunting question of all concerns the people themselves. We have their tools, their bones, and their pottery, but we know nothing of their language, their myths, or their names. What did they call themselves? What stories did they tell around their fires about the origin of these stones? What prayers were whispered among the rows during a solstice dawn? The silence of the archaeological record on these matters is absolute. The stones are a testament to a collective will and a shared belief so powerful it mobilized generations, yet the content of that belief remains just out of reach. This ultimate unknowability is what grants Carnac its timeless allure. It is not a problem to be solved, but a perpetual invitation to wonder. It reminds us that some human achievements are so profound they transcend their original function, becoming eternal symbols of our species' endless quest to find meaning, to reach for the stars, and to leave a mark that echoes long after our own names are forgotten. From the misty shores of prehistoric Brittany to the bright light of modern scientific inquiry, the silent army of Carnac continues to challenge and inspire. We've walked the same ground as the Neolithic builders, marveling at an undertaking of almost unimaginable scale, nearly 3,000 stones, some weighing tens of tons, quarried, transported, and erected by a society without metal, without the wheel, without anything but their collective will and a profound understanding of their world. We've explored the compelling theories, from the sophisticated astronomical observatory tracking solstices and lunar cycles to the sacred processional way leading to ancestral tombs, and we've sifted through the local legends that turned Roman legions to stone. The truth, as it so often is with deep history, likely resides in a beautiful, intricate blend of all these ideas. A site that was simultaneously calendar, temple, memorial, and territorial marker, the very heart of a culture's identity. What remains most stunning is not the mystery itself, but the enduring human need to solve it, to connect with those who came before. The Carnac alignments are a powerful reminder that our ancient ancestors were not primitive, but profoundly sophisticated master engineers, keen astronomers, and deep spiritual thinkers who sought to carve their understanding of the cosmos into the very landscape they cherished. They built for the ages, and in their silent granite sentinels, they left a permanent invitation for us to wonder, to question, and to feel the awe that transcends millennia. These stones do not simply represent a puzzle to be solved. They represent a conversation across time, a timeless echo of humanity's quest for meaning in a vast and mysterious universe. This conversation is far from over, and it now extends to you. What do you think was the primary purpose of these awe-inspiring rows? Do you lean towards the astronomical calendar theory, the spiritual processional path, or something else entirely? Perhaps you've been fortunate enough to walk among these giants yourself. If so, I would love to hear about your experience in the comments below. Sharing our perspectives is how we keep the story alive. If you've enjoyed this journey into one of history's greatest enigmas, Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for more explorations into the mysteries of our past. And if you ever find yourself with the opportunity, I cannot recommend enough making the pilgrimage to Brittany yourself. To stand in the presence of the Carnac Stones, to feel the weight of their history and the whisper of their secrets on the wind, is an experience that will stay with you forever. It is a powerful, humbling, and unforgettable encounter with the sublime.